Hello and welcome everyone. Let's give a couple of minutes for everybody to join, as I see that people are still joining. Meanwhile, please feel free to write us a message in chat and say hi and which city are you from. Your cameras and microphones are muted at the moment for the duration of the presentation and the Q&A session. However, after the Q&A session, I will invite you to enable microphones and cameras, and for those who like, we can have a more informal chat, as this is a meetup. I see that Sibylle is joining from a small village south of Munich. Hello, Sibylle. And Alfonso is joining from Portugal, from Lisbon. Hello and welcome. The topic for the today's meetup actually emerged during the previous webinar, as after the presentations, when we stayed and had a chat with the speaker, with the small group, there were a couple of questions related to systems and systems thinking, and that's why this is the topic of the today's meetup. All right, so I think that we are almost complete. So if somebody will be joining, then I will invite the people along the way. So let me share the screen and the presentation. All right. Okay. All right. I see that Maria is joining. Great. So I will be along the way. I will be checking the messages in the chat from time to time, and then I will be answering your questions. So feel free to post your questions in chat anytime. And then if I don't answer some questions during the presentation, then we will go over all the questions during the Q&A. So to start with, let me briefly introduce myself. And for that, I will use the structure, which is called T-shaped product manager. The idea behind the structure is that product management skills there are some transferable product management skills, and there are some skills specific to certain industry or domain. So I came into product management from engineering, and I'm working in this area already for a while. At the moment, I'm working mostly with the data science and machine learning teams, and also with the cross-functional initiatives. Another core interest, apart from product management, that I have is building high-performance teams and supporting the collaboration between stakeholders in the organizations. Hence the topic of today's presentation. I see that Loka cannot see the video, and I wonder if this is the same for everybody, because I can see that video is on, and you should see the picture. Could you please give some feedback in the chat if the video is active for everybody? All right, look, that might be some problem on your machine. Would you mind, if that doesn't work for you, just disconnecting and then connecting again, and that might solve the problem. Just yeah, great. Okay, I see that for everybody else video is working, so let's just try to disconnecting and connecting again. So to continue with the introduction, I work in the mobility industry, and I have experience in a couple of other industries, mostly working on B2B data and internal products. These are some of the companies with which I am or was working, and you can see that these are mostly large companies, and for such organizations, the topic of establishing efficient collaboration between multiple stakeholders is a very important one. So let's move on and talk about our agenda. Today, I will first of all provide the definition of this umbrella term systems thinking. Then I will explain why product managers or any other role working with the cross-functional teams needs systems thinking. And I will share 3 different systemic approaches that you can use in collaboration with teams, leads, and stakeholders. And then I will also illustrate how you can use those on a concrete practical example. So let's roll and let's talk about systems thinking. So systems thinking is an approach to reasoning and treatment of problems. And this approach is based on the understanding of the following 3 things: of the relationships between the components of the system, of the impact of those relationships on the results of the system, and on the interactions of the systems with the broader context. So in case of our system is a team, then we will talk about the collaboration in the team and the impact of this collaboration on the outcomes that the system is able to produce. And in this case, the wider organization will be our wider systemic context. So historically, we can distinguish 3 main waves of interest for systems thinking and consequent research. And within every wave, a different perception of a system was predominant. So in the beginning, systems were considered to be precise models of reality, which can be used as a base for technical solution. Then they were perceived more as an intellectual constructs used in a dialogue. And finally, critical systems thinking sees systems as interpretations of reality, which are different for different participants of a certain process or a dialogue. And the 4th wave of interest to systems thinking is simplifying and developing the ideas from the previous 3 waves. So why do product managers actually need systems thinking? If Picasso would visualize a product manager, then the picture would look like an image of a person who is looking in 2 directions at the same time, inwards and outwards. And this is what the product managers actually do. At every moment in time, product manager has to understand what the market requires and what the organization can offer, or what the team can do and what the organization needs, what the stakeholders need. And this knowledge comes from understanding the properties of the system. So in case of organization, that would be organizational structure, processes, culture, and so on. And market being wider systemic context. So the work of product manager is systemic in its nature. Moving on, let's look at the product manager, at the role of the product manager from an organizational perspective. And remember Plato's cave allegory, saying that we don't see the actual reality, but rather the distorted shadows of this reality on the walls of a cave, this cave being our consciousness. So in fact, in any organization, every team and every department is such a cave. And product manager has to get things done. And for that, product manager has to be able to do three things. So first of all, product manager needs to understand And by the way, that is also relevant not only to product management, but also to any other role working with cross-functional task forces, teams, and initiatives. So first of all, person who is in such a role should understand how the perception of reality in one team, in one cave, is different from the perception of reality in the other cave. And that includes, this perception also includes perception of urgency, perception of importance of the topic that this team and the other teams are working on, and the expected outcomes. Secondly, this person should be able to talk to people in each team and use the argumentation which is valid for them in order to make working agreements. And finally, the person in this role should be able to facilitate the collaboration of multiple teams to support them to get the results together. And to succeed, in order to be successful in those three activities, system thinking is absolutely necessary. So let's move on, and let me check the chat and see if there are any questions. Okay, so there are no questions so far. So then let's move on and let's talk about the three systemic approaches to collaboration with teams, leads, and stakeholders. We will talk about systemic team coaching, systems dynamics, and critical systems thinking. And we will not discuss any of those topics in detail. However, I will share some tools that you can borrow from, that I use in my work, and that you can also borrow from each of those approaches and apply in practice. So systemic team coaching is a process for developing teams towards high performance and improving the collaboration with different stakeholders. Systems dynamics provide us with the language of reinforcing and balancing feedback loops that can be used to describe the situations, work situations, and analyze them, searching for solutions, and also trying to uncover the underlying mental models that trigger those situations. And critical systems thinking, which perceives systems as interpretations of reality, which are different for different people, provides us principles and practices for efficient dialogue with the stakeholders. So let's move on and let's talk about systemic team coaching. Systemic team coaching provides us two important tools that help us to look at the issues, at the problems, the situations from different perspectives. Those two tools are 6 lenses of systemic team coaching, starting from the individual and interpersonal, moving on into the level of team relationships, stakeholder relationships, and also wider systemic context. And the second tool is called 5 disciplines. So let me illustrate. Let me move on and illustrate both. Illustrate the instruments on a concrete example. So inside of every product manager, there should be a little systemic coach, and this systemic coach should always ask the product manager different questions. For example, is the product manager talking to the right stakeholders? Does the product manager know the stakeholders? Do they have a face? Do they have names? Is the product manager talking to the right stakeholders about prioritization topics, and to the right stakeholders about the requirements? And quite often those are different stakeholders. Then do the stakeholders agree, understand, and agree with the roadmap that the product manager is driving? And in case if the stakeholders do not agree, Are they ready to follow the formula disagree and commit? Then moving inside of the team, other processes other work processes and work ways of working in the team, actually helping the team members to reach their goals, or are those processes more of a burden? Are the people aligned in the team? Are they people in the team, do they have a good team fit, and so on? And of course, you can say that there are other people who are responsible for, other than product manager, that are responsible for work processes, for example, and some other topics. However, the product manager is responsible for the outcomes, and as a person who is responsible for the outcomes, product manager should know very clearly in case if there is a problem in any of those areas, and product manager should be able to involve the right people and make sure that the problem is being solved on time. So let's move on and let's talk about systems dynamics. Systems dynamics provides us the possibility to look at different situations at various levels. So you can look at every issue at the level of separate events, or at the level of repeating patterns, or at the level of, or if you can see a system behind the level of a system, and also try to uncover the mental models that actually trigger those systems. So systems dynamic provides us the language that can be used for describe the systems, and also the library of systems archetypes, or most common types of the systems. And when you're trying to draw the model of a system using reinforcing and balancing loop, then you can see that usually it matches one or other archetype, and that helps you to visualize the situation faster. So let's take as an example the following teamwork anti-pattern, and we will call it lost in space. This is the situation when a product manager is distantiated from the relevant stakeholders and is not in contact with the stakeholders who should provide important information. And in this case, on the level of events, we can notice that after we have delivered the system, the user feedback showed that some of the assumptions that the team had about the work processes or the work environment of the users, those were false assumptions. Maybe we want to look in more details at the situation, and then we will figure out that the stakeholders of this team, they get to see and to know what is being developed quite late in the development process, and they can comment on the functionality also quite late. Then we might go on and observe the following situation, that the lack of exposure of the team members to their users, to their stakeholders, the lack of understanding in the team of the stakeholder operations, and the lack of knowledge about the stakeholder preferences makes the development process quite wasteful, because at the late stages, the new requirements always emerge from the stakeholders, and that causes a certain so-called scope explosion, and always delays the projects and messes up the planning. And then moving on the level of the mental models, we might discover that the product manager who is working with the team actually considers that at this point, fast delivery is more important than user experience. And the intention of the product manager is actually to deliver a working system and maybe later on improve it. And that might be an absolutely valid thought process. However, in this way, we need to make sure that we are actually achieving this speed as a final outcome, that the users of the system are able actually to use it. And if you look at the visualization of the system, then we can see that it matches the archetype, which is called fixes that fail, and you can see you can see the description of this anti-pattern and other anti-patterns of teamwork if you follow the link in the right bottom part of this slide. So let's move on and let's talk about the critical system thinking. So critical systems thinking provides us with the process for a dialogue with the stakeholders and analysis of the problems. And this dialogue has the following stages. We start with the so-called sweep in, and at the stage of the sweep in, we talk to different people and we listen to them, and we try to understand as many perspectives as we can, and so that in the next step, which is called unfolding, we would be able to expand the boundaries of our understanding of the system. However, this process can continue forever, as we can keep integrating more and more opinions, more and more perspectives. So in order to make it finite, we need to draw the boundary, to set the boundary. And critical systems thinking provides 4 criteria for setting the boundary. And let me illustrate each of those criteria on a concrete example. So let's say that we are talking about we are prioritizing the tasks for a certain team or work group for the next time period. So we are discussing prioritization, and in every prioritization conversation that we are having, we have to mind these 4 criteria. Talking about the sources of motivation, we have to mind whether we are actually still talking about prioritization, or maybe we already carried away and we are talking about the actual solution, or maybe we are talking about the capacity and we're discussing how many people will be able to work on this solution and when. Talking about the sources of control, we need to make sure that if we're taking some decisions, then all the right decision makers should be a part of this conversation. Otherwise, the decisions that we're going to take will not be valid. And we also have to mind the sources of knowledge. Maybe we can notice that a product manager is giving us estimates that a technical team, development team should be giving. Also talking about the sources of legitimacy, we need to make sure that all this conversation that we're having is actually compliant with the culture and ways of working that we agreed upon in the company. Maybe we agreed upon a certain approach for prioritization, and that very way how we are having this current conversation is violating this prior agreement. In addition to this process, critical system thinking provides the following 4 principles that make the dialogue with the different stakeholders efficient. So those principles are the following. The system approach begins when first you see the world through the eyes of another person. The system approach goes on to discover that every worldview is terribly restricted. There are no experts in the systems approach. And finally, the system approach is not a bad idea. And following those 4 principles ensures humbleness and inclusiveness that allows us to see the concerns through the eyes of the people who raise those concerns. So let's move on and let's talk about the practical example, how actually those 3 different systemic approaches can be applied to a practical case using some tools. So as a practical case, let me talk about another anti-pattern. As well, you can find more information about this and other anti-patterns following this link in the right bottom corner. So this anti-pattern is called tornado management. And I'm quite sure that I'm quite sure that everybody is familiar with this situation. This is the situation when a manager is not really respecting the boundaries of their role. And quite often, people who are working in tech have to work with the technical leads or product managers who are falling into this anti-pattern, and they promise stakeholders like a lot. They promise magic. They promise things that are very, very questionable, but look great, sound great. Then they introduce new shiny technologies in the team without consent of the other team members, and at one point the team might get blocked because the team will not be able to deliver something, as the only person who knows this technology is the person who actually introduced it into the team. And this behavior disrupts prioritization and put the team in a state of, let's say, constant senseless emergency, when the team members need to do everything, need to do it at once. And the only thing which is not clear is like why all these things have to be done. So I think I hope I kind of made a picture of the situation. So let's talk about how could we approach this situation in a systemic way using the tools that we have discussed. So first of all, we would need to describe the situation, and we can use the tools that systemic team coaching provides for that. So the 6 lenses of systemic team coaching and the disciplines. And then after we identify the issues on the side of the people, on the side of the tasks, inside of the team, outside of the team, and the issues on different levels, on the interpersonal level, on the stakeholder level, team relationship level, and so on. We would need, of course, to narrow down and identify the most acute problems that we want to solve in the first place. And let's say that in the first place, we want to focus in this situation on solving the problems inside of the team. Then we would need to pick the right tools for solving the issue. And in this case, we might go for the systems dynamics diagram in order to illustrate what is happening inside of the team and use this chart in a conversation, and the RACI metrics that would help us to separate responsibilities with the person who is causing the issue. So a recap on the RACI metrics. This is a simple but powerful tool that allows to separate the responsibilities, and it is very handy to use in conversations and make agreements with the help of this RACI metrics. So of course, we would need to engage into the conversation with this person, and during this, as an outcome of this conversation, you would either make some agreements, or maybe you would learn something, some new information that would make you reconsider your own understanding of the situation and reevaluate the priorities, and maybe choose different tools and different approach. And let's say that in our concrete case, we find out that our colleague is actually talking to way more stakeholders than we thought, and the impact on the outside of the team is way bigger than the impact in the team. And then we decided to change the focus and focus first on the stakeholder management. And for that, we would need different tools. And these tools could be, for example, a collaborative roadmap, or better to say, a collaborative road mapping process introduced in the team. The stakeholder map used as a tool for conversation and alignment with this colleague, and the same RACI metrics. So let me talk a bit more about the stakeholder map. And let's imagine the situation when Kate is we're talking about data science team, which is working within a data department. Kate is the product manager of this team, and Thorsten, who is the technical lead in the team, is actually the colleague which is causing those troubles. So in this case, Kate could draw such a picture, sit together with Thorsten, and explain that the data science team has two stakeholders, the marketing department and the engineering marketing automation team that automates some of the marketing tasks. And for some of those automations, the automation team would need data science support. So talking about the prioritization, Kate could explain that Lena, the head of marketing, prioritizes the topics to be automated together with Kai, product manager from the marketing automation. And afterwards, Kate would prioritize the data science topics with Kai. And those data science prioritization topics, the prioritization of those data science topics would be an input for the data science roadmap. However, Kate does not take the priorities out of the thin air, but she also minds the overall data department priorities. So that in the case when marketing needs to automate, let's say, 2 tasks that require data science involvement, and the data science team has capacity only for one, then Lena, the head of marketing, is also involved to consult the teams on the priorities and choose which one of the tasks will be automated. Concurrently to that, the engineering conversation is ongoing, where Thorsten and Alex, the engineer from marketing automation team, are involved, and they're discussing the technical implementation of these tasks. And Pete, an analyst from marketing, should be always involved and consulted, as he can provide the technical requirements from the stakeholders' perspective. And also we have Vivian, and nobody is quite sure about the current role of Vivian, and that also is quite normal, and that happens because organizational changes do not happen overnight, and a certain degree of uncertainty, some degree of uncertainty for some role or some roles sometimes is present. So, however, Vivian is working in the data department for a very long time, and she knows everything about our data. So let's call her data steward and make sure that she is involved in any engineering conversation where data science team is also involved. So going through this drawing and discussing things with Thorsten would help Kate to identify, to understand where they are not aligned, where what Thorsten understands differently about his role, about Kate's role, about the relations with the stakeholders and the work processes. So to wrap up, in case if we take those approaches and we take those tools and we follow those approaches and we use those tools, would this mean that we will solve any collaboration problem in our organization, or any technical problem in our organization? And the spoiler is that, of course, no, because there is no process, no tool, and no person who will come and solve all the problems. The problems in tech are being solved through teamwork and collaboration of multiple people and multiple teams. However, I hope that after this meetup, you will take some of the useful tools into your toolbox, and that will help you to improve teamwork and collaboration in your organizations. Thank you. This is everything from my side. Let's move on into the Q&A part. And let me open the chat and see if there are any questions. Maybe let me move one slide back for the recap. Okay, so there is a question in the chat. In the example stakeholder map, you draw one team with two stakeholders. It is easy to understand how not to get lost in the stakeholder map with multiple teams and stakeholders. Thank you, Marina. Okay, yes, I know what you mean. Of course, if you try to visualize the whole, all the relationships of a department with different stakeholders, then the stakeholder map would be huge. It would take the whole wall or like a huge mirror board, and probably you wouldn't be able to make much sense out of it. So the goal of the stakeholder map is not to create the perfect drawing of a stakeholder relations, the complete drawing of the stakeholder relations. You can use it simply as a tool for solving a concrete case, concrete issue, and it is enough to put on the stakeholder map only the stakeholders that are relevant for that concrete case. All right. Let me see if there were some other questions in the chat. Yes, welcome. I will also share the slides and the recording in the group after the presentation. Okay, there is another question. Can you tell more about collaborative roadmaps? How do you create them? Great. So talking about the collaborative roadmaps. So we can talk about the roadmaps not, I would prefer to talk about roadmaps not as about the artifacts, but more as about the process. So more about road mapping than roadmaps. And as the team of the people who are doing the implementing the solution is the source of the estimates. So people who are doing the job have to estimate the effort. It makes a lot of sense having the team create the roadmap, and as a product manager, you bring in the priorities and you bring in some concrete deliverables that have to be delivered, that stakeholders definitely need, and you keep the rest open for the team, and then you just provide the team with some tool like a mirror board or a physical board in case if you are collocated, or simply Google Slides with boxes and arrows, and put the roadmap together collaboratively. It takes it takes teams a couple of sessions to get used to this process, and as a starting point, the activity that worked well and that I can recommend is called roadmap called in the teams that I was working with roadmap refresh. And the idea of the activity was that once in a sprint or once in a month, depending on the length of your sprints, the team members, somebody from the team that was a rotating responsibility, used to present the roadmap and the milestones to the rest of the team and some stakeholders who were invited, and that would make sure that would ensure that the team members are aware and are aware about the roadmap, share the same understanding of the roadmap, and after you do it for several times, then you can already move into the collaborative roadmapping. That will be an easier transition. So there is a question from Aaron. Can you discuss the process working agreement, pre-cycle starting versus during crisis in the cycle? That's an absolutely valid question. Thank you for that. And of course, clarity makes collaboration way easier, and clarity in the beginning and the clear responsibility separation in the beginning also makes collaboration way easier. And I would actually advocate for radical transparency in everything which is related to roles, responsibilities, also related to planning, also related to planning and working documents, for sure. The situation that the work situations that we are facing nowadays, with all the high pace of changes, both in the markets and inside of the organization, in fact, makes us face the situations when the roles are fluid and people are taking care of different topics compared to their role descriptions or their initial role descriptions. So some change is always happening, and therefore some of those crisis situations, they do emerge. And I think that it is very important to embrace this state of affairs and to maintain in your toolbox some tools that will help to resolve those crisis situations, because in any case, those situations will emerge, and this is just our normal state of affairs. Thank you for the question. If there are more questions, then please share them in the chat. And if there are no more, yes, thank you. Great. Then, as I don't see any more questions in the chat so far, then let me stop the recording. And for those who like, then feel free to enable your microphones and cameras and simply speak up, and we can have a chat and discuss topics that you are interested in. So I will stop the recording now, and then we can switch into the conversation.